right, Rodent Sports is back to talk about my bracket picks. Filled them out Monday night, slept on them, made some changes. Here we go. West Region, I've got Gonzaga over Texas Tech in the regional final. I think Texas Tech gets the regional final in part because Davidson upsets Duke in the second round. That's one of my big Cinderella teams is Davidson. I've got them in the Sweet 16 after they beat Michigan State and knock over Duke, two blue bloods. Again, I'll admit a little Atlantic 10 bias from me there.
My favorite.
As I am, I'm a VCU fan. I'm in the A10 and I've seen Davidson a lot, but I think they're very efficient offensively. And they play at a pace that is not going to be that's going to be comfortable for them in NCAA tournaments, which do tend to be slower paced for the most part. So I think they get there until they face a really good defensive team in Texas Tech. But Gonzaga, I think, just has a little too much firepower for Texas Tech. So we start there with in the West region, and Texas Tech is winning. So who are they going to face in that Final Four in the East? This is where I have a little bit of nuttiness here. Baylor is the number one seed, but remember, Baylor lost their first conference tournament game, and whenever you're filling out a bracket, not only do you never take a team that loses their first conference tournament game to win the national championship because it's never happened, quite often those teams fall early.
You are going to crash and burn.
Sometimes in the first weekend. Now, I do have Baylor getting out of the first weekend. I do have them in the Sweet 16, although if they have to play North Carolina, it would not be unusual for North Carolina to knock off a high seed in the second round. They've done it before. Granted, again, new coach, Hubert Davis. This is his first year. He's in the tournament. And I like Shaka Smart and Marquette to get out of there. Again, got a lot of good feelings for Shaka Smart because of his time at VCU. I do think Baylor gets the second weekend, but I think they're going to be facing UCLA. And I had a tough time with this because UCLA could play St. Mary's in round 2. That is one of those situations, and I talked about it in the last video. I mean, for St. Mary's, it's going to be like the national championship for them because how many times are they ever going to get a shot at a blue blood like UCLA or USC for that matter? And even though they're playing Indiana, I do think St. Mary's will get through there into the second round. But I think UCLA gets through. I think if they get through, they take advantage of Baylor. Not just the issue of losing their first conference game. Baylor has some injuries. Jonathan Chachua, one of their best interior players, even though he's not the starter, is out. And, when they played VCU this year in the Bahamas, Chachua was the big difference. So for me, I think that's where Baylor gets done. I think UCLA gets them and gets in that regional final. I've got Kentucky in the regional final against them. Kentucky could have a little issue with Murray State because, again, that's kind of like St. Mary's UCLA. In that region, Kentucky is the blue blood. And Murray State to get a shot at a team like Kentucky when otherwise they never would be just massive for them. And they would probably give Kentucky a real tough game. That said, I think Kentucky gets a Cinderella in Sweet 16. Another double-digit seed that I think gets out of the first weekend is Virginia Tech, who were absolutely fantastic in that ACC tournament after nearly losing the first game. They turned it around and played great after that, and I think Purdue can be vulnerable. They've had they had a great run when UVA won the title, and they should have beat UVA in the regional final and didn't. But outside of that, they've had a lot of early exits recently, including last year. They lost to North Texas. So I think Virginia Tech is one of these. I mean, could be a great year for the 11s. I think they'll knock over Texas, and then they'll beat Purdue. And that's another interesting thing. I end up following. For now, I've ended up following the ESPN guys on that. They said on their show that all 4 11s could win. That's only happened one time ever, and that's 1989. That is what I have as of now. That will depend on whether Notre Dame wins their playing game against Rutgers. If they don't, that's where I will find my 1/6 seed that wins. So I've got UCLA, Kentucky in the final, and I like Johnny Juzang. I like the fact that UCLA made the Final Four last year. I've seen I've seen Kentucky be had. Tennessee really outplayed them in that SEC tournament, and even though the score didn't indicate it, I thought won convincingly in that. And so I like UCLA to get to the Final Four. I have Gonzaga, which would be a heck of a semifinal for one, and of course, one of the things, because I've been watching old NCAA tournament, great finish, fantastic finish or famous finishes video. That's a rematch of a rather famous regional semifinal where Gonzaga had a 17-point lead in the second half against UCLA and lost. And Adam Morrison was famously in tears at the end of the game. So that's one half of the bracket. I've got Gonzaga versus UCLA. So a little bit of anarchy in the East region there. So let's go to the South region, where Arizona's the number 1 seed. And certainly Tommy Lloyd's done an amazing job. If he's not the National Coach of the Year, they shouldn't have it. I was looking because we were, they were talking, one of my friends and I were talking right before this, maybe Sean Miller left behind a good team. They were kind of mediocre last year. They were 17-9. They were 11-9 in the Pac-12. They didn't get in the NCAA tournament. In fact, they hadn't won the Pac-12 regular season since 2018. And they've had some tough years, all the controversy swirling around Sean Miller and all that. So for Tommy Lloyd, who, again, first-time head coach. Yes, he was Mark Few's assistant at Gonzaga for 20 years and his right-hand man, and Gonzaga's success has been otherworldly in that time. But he's a first-time head coach going into a major head coaching job. Arizona's a destination head coaching job, which is why I thought he might struggle. Unbelievable. 31-3. Just massive. And so I have Arizona getting to that Final 8. I don't foresee many problems on that side of the bracket. Maybe Illinois, if they got through there, could cause them a problem. I think Illinois will be upset by Chattanooga. It's a good year for 13s, a lot of 13s. One other thing, usually a 12 beats a 5. It's happened every year, but I think once since 1985. I actually have all the 5s winning this year. I think the best 12, the 12 that I like the best, or the 12 that I think has got the best chances in this region, it's Alabama-Birmingham, because that Alabama-Birmingham-Houston used to be in the same league. I mean, it's been a while, it's been a few years, but there's a little bit of rivalry there, and I think that could make that a very interesting game. Plus, Alabama-Birmingham had to beat a really good Middle Tennessee team in that tournament to get over the line, and then beat. And then got through when North Texas lost. The other 12 that I think is a good chance is New Mexico State against Connecticut, but I think Connecticut will just get through there. Get through there also. But yeah, so I like Chattanooga to upset Illinois, and then that would clear the path for Houston. I think Arizona would not have much trouble with Houston. So Arizona against who in the regional final? Well, I love Tennessee. Tennessee should not have been a 3 seed. They should have been a 2. That was the big. There weren't many real controversies from this bracket, but one of the ones there was how is Tennessee behind any of the 2 seeds, which is what I would have said. I would have had Tennessee ahead of all the 2 seeds: Duke, Villanova, Auburn, Kentucky. I thought Tennessee was better than all of them.
You think that you're better?
Won the SEC tournament, and Kentucky made a mess of them at Rupp Arena. Beat the holy snot out of them. It was 107-79. That was January 15th. They've only lost 2 games since January 15th, and one of those was 1-point loss at Texas in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. So Tennessee's been one of the best playing teams in the country as far as I'm concerned for the last 2 months, which is unfortunate for Longwood, who for me is the strongest 14. Maybe even by some distance, but if they had any other 3 than Tennessee, I'd give them a chance to pull the upset. But to me, they got a doggone monster at 3.
Look!
Devastated.
So I like the Vols there. I think the Vols get a little bit of help. I think Loyola of Chicago as a 10 will knock over Ohio State and then upset Villanova in what will be, Villanova will try to speed it up, but it will be played at a crawl. Loyola Chicago, very offensively efficient, even though they played a very slow pace. I think they upset Villanova, then Tennessee beats them. So I have Arizona, Tennessee in the final, and I like Tennessee. Tennessee's one of the best defensive teams in the country, top 5 in efficiency all year. I think they're currently number 2 in defensive efficiency. That makes a difference. Not the most explosive team out there, but a lot of balanced scoring. 4 or 5 guys that average 8 or 9 points a game or more. And I think this may be Rick Barnes' time. He's kind of a hit and miss coach in the NCAA tournament. He's only made 1 Final Four, even though he's had a lot of good teams in Texas and Tennessee. But I think their moment may have come here. And I like them, and I think they'll be in the Final Four. And so that leaves the last region we're going to talk about, which is the Midwest. See who Tennessee's playing. That's number 1 seed is Kansas there. And I have Kansas getting to the Sweet 16. I think they get past Creighton, which again, that's another one of those. In the Midwest, Kansas is the blue blood, or one of the big blue bloods, and they never play a team like Creighton, hardly ever, who's right next door in Nebraska. So this is a big, if Creighton can get through, this would be a huge moment for them. And I think Kansas would be put to the test there. But for me, the hottest team in this region is Iowa. Iowa, lost 3 out of 4 in early to mid-January, and much like Tennessee, only lost 2 games since. And they were absolutely fantastic in that Big Ten tournament. And the other thing about Iowa is they can fill it up. A couple different times this year, they've gone for 100-plus. They have firepower. Richmond is not going to be able to stop that offense, in my opinion. And then I think they get a little help because here's another 13 I think beats a 4, and that's South Dakota State beating Providence. And that's the thing. 12s and 5s have always been the big upset watch because almost every year it happens. But in about the last 5 years now, 13s beating a 4 has become fairly regular. And I got 2 of them this year. South Dakota State. And I'll tell you what, if we get Iowa, South Dakota State, the scoreboard keeper might need a sub because that they'll be lighting the scoreboard up. That's a game where the first to 90 wins. But I think Iowa's got just a little too much firepower with Keegan Murray and Jordan Bohannon, who hit that big 3 to beat Indiana in the semifinal. He had a pretty good, he was pretty darn good in that tournament game last year that they ended up losing to Oregon. I think he's ready to rock and roll. So I've got Iowa beating South Dakota State and then upsetting Kansas. Because again, I think they got so much firepower that I think they can really come after Kansas and outscore them. So who are they going to play? That bottom of the bracket is tough because Auburn, another team that lost their first conference game. And if there's a 15 that can cause a real problem, it's Jacksonville State. Yes, I mentioned in the last video they had to back their way in. But Ray Harper is a really good coach in March, and they're a pretty tough team. They can win either way. They can win playing really slow because they've had some low-scoring games this year that they've found a way to win, and they've also had to win games in the 70s and 80s and done that. And I think they could give Auburn a problem, and if they do, 1s and 2 seeds that struggle in round 1 and don't play well and get pushed often go bye-bye in round 2, and I think they do go bye-bye Auburn against USC.
Isn't he darling, honey? I've never seen such a cute little bird. Let's take him home.
Hey, no, stop! I'm not a bird. I'm a weirdo. When I get out of here, animal, you're in big trouble. Do you hear me?
Although I will say that I'll have Miami in plenty of brackets, backup brackets, getting to the Sweet 16 as well. I think USC upsets Auburn. Andy Enfield, a really good tournament coach, had that big run with Florida Gulf Coast many years back, has had a pretty good postseason record with Southern Cal, so I think they get through. And I think Wisconsin will get through their 2 games. I just don't see anybody. Colgate will cause them a problem, especially if the pace gets up, but I think they'll survive Colgate. So I got Wisconsin over USC, so I got all Big Ten final in the Midwest, which would be classic. And I think Iowa will beat Wisconsin because, again, I think, Wisconsin does at times have a struggle on offense, and I think Iowa's offense is just cooking. So I've got Final Four, Tennessee versus Iowa on the one side of the bracket, which will be a kind of a mini bracket collapse because it's 3 versus 5. Gonzaga, UCLA, 1 versus 4. So I got 1 seed going through. And the reason I can say that is there's never been less separation at the top than this year. Last year, you had two clearly really awesome teams. You had Gonzaga and Baylor, and you would have had Michigan, but unfortunately, Michigan had a key injury before the tournament that really took them out of the national title picture. Otherwise, you would have had three teams that were separated from everybody else. And once Illinois circled the drain in round 2 last year, a Baylor-Gonzaga final always looked on the cards because they were clearly the two best teams. Not the case this year. We had a day this year where the top 6 teams in the country all lost. So really, there's no outstanding super team. They could all go down if they have a bad night or hit the right opponent. And so my bracket kind of reflects that. It reflects that there isn't much separation between the 1 seeds and the 5 or 6 or 7 best teams in the country and the next 12 or 13, which is how you can get a bracket like this. So. All right, Final Four. I think Gonzaga gets past UCLA again, barely again, just as they did last year. That would be a classic. And then Tennessee against Iowa, the irresistible force, Iowa's offense against the immovable object, Tennessee's defense. As I said before, tournament games do tend to be slower paced. If Tennessee gets the pace down and it turns into a half-court game and a rock fight, Tennessee is well capable of winning those. So I have Tennessee against Gonzaga, and I have Tennessee cutting the nets down. Rick Barnes finally gets his championship, and Gonzaga once again gets close and cannot close the deal, which unfortunately has been their problem. This would be final number 3 if this bracket is correct, and they would be 0 for 3 in those finals, and that would be really, really tough. But we go, of course, and I will definitely have brackets that have this. We could get Mark Few against his number 1 lieutenant, Tommy Lloyd, in a final, which if we had Gonzaga, Arizona, that would be an amazing final. And it would be something because we'd either have, the mid-major program who's not mid-major anymore finally getting off the Schneider. We'd have a real, actual first-year coach winning a national title in basketball, which pretty much never happens. You could technically say Steve Fisher, but of course he took that team over right before the tournament. And the tournament were the first games he ever coached as a head coach. So I kind of don't count that, but other people might. So Tennessee, Gonzaga, that is my bracket. That's the bracket that I'm entering for money in every pool. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is with this. But of course, because ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, and any other bracket site that does a competition has it, I will have backup brackets. I will have adjustment brackets. I will definitely have brackets with Arizona winning it, getting the Final Four and winning it, and with Gonzaga winning it, and with Kentucky winning it, and all sorts of other teams. Because if you're going to give me 25 brackets to fill out, baby, I'm going to use them. That's just the way it is. So that's it for this edition of Rodent Sports. Like and subscribe on YouTube, share it around, check it out, comment, because I want to hear other people's opinions on this. And thanks for watching. Until next time.
That's it. We're done, right?